welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking closely at some really interesting source materials. They get into something super practical, actually.
Yeah, practical for anyone who speaks in public, really. It's all about your physical presence, how you deliver your message.
Exactly. And these sources, we've got lecture notes, some excerpts, a guide, all focused on posture, action, gesture. A lot of it draws from classic thinking, especially useful, I think, in ministry contexts.
Definitely. These older insights have a lot to say.
So our goal here, our mission, is pretty straightforward. We want to pull out the key ideas, the real nuggets of wisdom from these texts.
And maybe some surprising details, too.
Yeah, definitely. We'll look at what the sources really condemn, things they call grotesque or affected delivery. And then what they hold up as the ideal, which is, well, basically being natural.
It's all about understanding what gets in the way of connecting with people and what actually helps build that connection when you speak.
Okay, so let's dive in. Where do these sources start?
Well, interestingly, they jump right into the problems. Right off the bat, they focus on things to avoid. They don't start with the ideal posture, but with, the pitfalls.
Okay, avoiding the bad stuff first.
Right.
Makes sense. And the first big issue is what they term grotesque action.
That's the term they use, grotesque action. And they mention this old author who apparently cataloged absurd gestures way back when. So this isn't exactly a new problem.
Oh, okay. So what's on this list? How bad could it get?
Oh, it's quite something. Gives you a real picture. Things like speakers holding their heads totally stiff, like locked to one side.
Prison mid-thought.
Pretty much. Or staring horribly, like actually trying to scare the audience.
That's not ideal for communication.
No. Or twisting their mouths, working their chins constantly.
Yeah.
The image given is like someone cracking nuts while trying to speak.
Okay, that's vivid.
Yeah.
And maybe a bit unsettling.
Uh-huh. Then there's using facial expressions to show insult or contempt. They even name the apostate Julian as an example. Or gaping, mouth wide open like they might swallow everyone. And sometimes, apparently, scattering foam.
Foam. Okay, wow. That is definitely grotesque.
Then there's making these constant complex motions with fingers, like drawing math problems in the air. Or having hands that are just heavy, ponderous, stuck by fear. The source says they look like they could move timber easier than gesture.
Ponderous hands fixed by terror. The descriptions are quite potent.
They really are. Laboring with the elbows like a shoemaker. Bodies unsteady like they're in a little boat, a cockboat being tossed around. Or just being awkward, unwieldy, described as sacks of tow trying to pass as men.
Sacks of tow painted to look like men. These writers didn't hold back, did they?
Not at all. And even jumping, capeering around. They call it the fuller's dance. There's an old poet quoted saying these speakers express their wit with their feet.
Wit with their feet, right? Now, some of this sounds almost comical, like historical caricature, but the sources say these kinds of things, these singular distracting gestures, they were still happening in their day.
Absolutely. That's the point they make. The potential for just sort of physical weirdness when speaking in public seems to be a timeless challenge.
Okay, so it's not just random oddities. The sources actually break this down, don't they? They categorize these grotesque actions.
They do. They see patterns in the awkwardness, specific types of pitfalls.
So what's the first category?
The first one they label the stiff. And it's pretty much what it sounds like. Speakers with no natural bend, rigid joints, arms and legs moving like they're on iron hinges.
Angular mechanical movements. Like a wooden dummy.
Yeah, or like the limbs belong to some machine, sometimes just jerking up and down. The analogies are like legs being tongs or a linen horse, arms like pokers.
And the issue isn't just looking awkward, is it? It actually gets in the way of the message.
Exactly. The sources say it distracts people. Even if the speech itself is admirable, the audience notices the awkwardness instead. They quote Philo saying people shouldn't notice these trifles, but then immediately counter that, well, people do notice. It creates a barrier.
Anything that makes the listener think about you instead of the content is a problem. Is there a suggested fix for the stiff?
It's pretty simple, actually. They suggest maybe just any sort of physical exercise might help cure it, getting the body used to moving more fluidly.
Okay. So, moving on from stiff to what's next in the mechanical issues?
That leads right into the regular mechanical. This is where speakers move like automatons, predictable, measured movements. But they don't seem connected to any real thought or feeling.
That kind of relentless repetition that just grinds you down as a listener.
Precisely. It becomes wearying, and because it's not linked to the words, it feels meaningless. They give examples like, The little soldier weather vane, lifting one arm then the other, predictable.
Right.
Or just jerking the arms alternately, or chopping one arm up and down, constantly, like it's powered by wind or clockwork.
Or just that monotonous hand movement, up, down, up, down.
There's this amazing observation from Ludovicus Chrysolius back in 1620. He described a preacher in Paris who just kept turning left, then right, with the exact same moderate hand gesture at regular intervals. He compared him to blindfolded Babylonian oxen just pacing back and forth.
Wow. That sounds hypnotic in the worst possible way. You'd completely tune out.
You would. And the sources mention a style apparently common in the House of Commons at the time, just this up and down bob of the back and hand, like a waiter taking an order. They even had a little rhyme for it. Mr. Tat-Tat, you must not pat your arguments flat.
Patting arguments flat.
Yeah.
Got it. And the pump handle style fits here too. That repetitive arm jerking.
Yes, exactly. Moore's rather harsh description of Lord Castlereagh is used here, comparing his speaking style to a pump. A slender wooden thing, awkward arm swaying, spouting a weak, washy, everlasting flood, repetitive and empty.
Then there's the saw-like actions. Arm going back and forth.
Top Sawyer cutting timber, yeah. Often leaning over the pulpit rail. They add a little joke that converted Sawyers are welcome, but maybe leave the sawing motion behind.
Fair enough. And then the hammermen.
Ah, yes, the pounders.
Smiting and pounding away.
Ruining Bibles, dusting cushions. They quote Hudibras about the pulpit drum ecclesiastic. The point is, they hammer away, without sense or reason, it doesn't matter the topic, trying to convey tenderness with hammer blows.
Hammering tenderness? Seems like a mismatch.
Just a bit. The source does distinguish between dull hammering and hearty hammering, saying the hearty kind is maybe preferable if you must hammer. There's even this wild historical note about old Latin sermon manuscripts suggesting you shake a crucifix and hammer like Satan to gather your thoughts.
That's quite a technique.
The main takeaway for all these regular mechanical types is that endless repetition of one action is just tiring and meaningless. It makes the speaker seem less like a living person and more like, well, a machine. The movements feel intentional, sure, but totally disconnected from real feeling or the actual point being made.
That lack of connection seems to lead into the next category they discuss. The laborious.
Right. This is all about excessive effort. The speaker looks like they're doing incredibly hard work, puffing, blowing. The sermon becomes a battle, a wrestling match.
Like you're trying to physically knock down sin, like an ox.
That's one image they use. Or taking off your collar, your cravat, even your coat, the Wild Brothers style. They tell a story of an Irish thunderer who actually broke a chair preaching.
Broke a chair?
And a distinguished actor who converted and apparently kept striking the table or floor with his staff. The sources argue, look, if your voice is strong enough, you shouldn't need all that.
But they also suggest this can sometimes be tied to a person's background, a relic of the preacher's trade.
Yes. Sometimes you see echoes of former jobs, a wheelwright still making wheel motions, an engineer, a cooper, a grocer weighing things, a butcher, well, knocking down a bullock. The sources are maybe a bit more forgiving here, saying these are less blameworthy than some other awkward habits.
But it's not just former tradesmen. Even educated gentlemen can fall into this.
Oh yeah, beating the air, working hard at doing nothing. Sometimes, the sources say, their actions are even more hideous than the common folk. The list goes on. Beating carpets, chopping sticks, mincing sausage meat, patting butter, even poking fingers at people's eyes.
It's quite a catalog of strenuous activity.
It is, and the sources contrast it with easier, more dignified approaches. But interestingly, while it's laborious, they seem to hint it might actually be better than the next pitfall.
Which is the lazily dignified.
Exactly. This is the speaker who seems totally self-possessed. Often seen rubbing their hands together, the description is priceless. Washing his hands with invisible soap in imperceptible water.
Huh. I can picture that.
And they deliver maybe quite ordinary ideas, but with this air of profound importance, as if they're outdoing the greatest preachers like Robert Hall or Chalmers.
Pausing, looking around,
Yeah.
expecting everyone to be hanging on their every, perhaps not so profound word.
It's that big manner, an attitude of authority mixed with a lot of self-satisfaction. And the sources really dislike this one. They condemn it more strongly than the sweaty, vigorous style. They say it might amuse people at first, but then it just disgusts sensible listeners.
So better to break a chair than wash your hands with invisible soap. That's the takeaway.
Seems to be the hierarchy of offenses, yeah. They do mention that college training sometimes helps students get over this sort of inflated mannerism.
Okay, what are the last couple of categories in this section?
Just two more main types here. First, the martial. This speaker looks like they're in a fight.
Fencing stance.
Yeah, or standing on guard, attacking some unseen foe, turning their head triumphantly after making a point, like they just vanquished an enemy.
Okay. And the last one?
The ill-timed. This is simply when the action is out of sync with the words, the hands lag behind. So you see a chop or a thump, but it seems disconnected until you realize it actually matched something said a few seconds earlier.
That would be really strange to watch.
Strange to the last degree, they call it. Puzzling, odd.
Okay, that covers the main categories of grotesque actions. But the sources also list other things they just call altogether ugly or unseemly, right? Sort of a miscellaneous category of bad habits.
Exactly. Things often seen on platforms generally, not just pulpits.
So give us some examples here. What else should be avoided?
Okay, things like grasping a rail and dropping down really low while speaking, called supremely absurd and a monstrous accompaniment to eloquence.
Shrugging your shoulders, especially with serious points.
Yes, they say it makes the speaker look round-shouldered, even hunchbacked. They mention a specific excellent preacher in Bristol who apparently did this, and they bring up Demosthenes, again, his rather extreme cure, practicing in a narrow space with the spear hanging over his shoulder. If he shrugged, he got poked.
A sharp remedy indeed. What about hand placement? Hands behind the back.
That's the water wagtail style, hands behind the coattails. Makes a singular figure, apparently, and the flapping coattails don't add to the solemnity.
Hands on hips.
Akimbo. That apparently savors of Billingsgate, like the fish market sellers. Just preposterous as a general posture for speaking.
Hands in pockets. Trousers pocket.
That's called outrageous. Suggests contempt for the audience, for the subject. They mention seeing it at French railway stations, maybe a common casual posture, but totally inappropriate for speaking, setting a bad example even if done by someone with a strong personality.
Doms hooked in the waistcoat armholes.
The penguin style
Yeah.
often involves throwing the coat back to show off the vest. Maybe okay at a dinner or a local gathering if you're a man of some standing, they concede, but out of character for a public speaker or minister as a regular habit.
Holding onto the coat lapels or near the collar.
Yeah, running hands up and down, clutching it like ropes suggests either you need to keep yourself under control or maybe just self-satisfaction.
Looking into your own palm.
And sort of picking out ideas like there are flowers growing there. The source mentions seeing a good minister do this. The thoughts were fine, but the action was just ungraceful.
Gently tapping the forehead.
Like knocking on the mind's door. Seen as peculiar, not really forceful.
Pointing into the hand or stabbing the air.
Called an amusing freak of action.
Scratching your head.
They say it's maybe less advisable than just passing a hand over the brow, though perhaps just as natural sometimes. And one more. Accidental grotesqueness, like an outspread hand moving up and down with the sentence rhythm, can be okay if not monotonous, but it's easily prone to looking like putting the thumb of scorn to the nose of contempt. Apparently some speakers did this constantly without realizing.
Okay, that is quite the list of things not to do. A real minefield of potential awkwardness. But even with all that, the sources seem to save their harshest words for one particular style.
They absolutely do. It's what they call the superfine style. And they just unload on this one. Utterly despicable and abominable, they call it. Worse even than common vulgarity.
Worse than the water wagtail or the pocket stuffer. Wow.
Yeah, because they see it as the very essence of vulgarity, but it's disguised, flavored with affectations and airs of gentility. It's the fakeness, the pretense, that really offends them.
And they give a pretty detailed example, don't they?
Oh, yes. Roland Hill's sketch of a character named Mr. Taplash, he's the embodiment of it. Primped up, dressed in this overly finished style, perfect hair, powdered white by his barber, smelling strongly of perfume, a civet cat.
Makes a conceited skip into the pulpit.
And he's not just there to deliver a message, he's there to display himself.
Right.
His elegant self, showing off a delicate white hand, maybe a diamond ring, handling a fancy scented handkerchief with great skill and art.
Uses a smelling bottle, too.
Apparently, yes. Gives him a chance to flash the ring again. And he even uses a glass, probably an opera glass, to sort of scan the fair part of his audience.
Checking out the ladies.
And giving them a simpering look and a graceful nod if he catches their eye. It's just this picture of utter vanity and affectation. They also quote Cowper's poem describing similar clergy, fussing with eyebrows, hair, using opera glasses, noticing the women.
And the quote from Cowper ends. Now, this is fulsome, and offends me more than in a churchman's slovenly neglect and rustic coarseness would.
That's the crucial comparison. Simple, even rough honesty is far better than this polished phoniness.
So, manliness authenticity is preferred over this kind of effeminate elegance.
Absolutely. They cite Cicero saying gesture should come from the military camp or the wrestling ring, not from dancers. Manliness shouldn't be sacrificed. And they argue that ordinary working people, they just won't connect with teachers who are all starched and fine.
They prefer someone hardy, natural, what the sources call a brave negligence over foppish attention to appearance.
There's that really telling story from Abbé Moulois about the converted Parisian worker. The preacher asked him what was most influential in his conversion. The man was honest, said the sermon itself had very little effect on him.
So it wasn't the words.
Not primarily. What really got through to him was the preacher's manner. Open, simple, good-natured, and specifically, he said, above all, your ill-combed hair.
His messy hair, that's fascinating.
It sounds strange, but the reason was key. The worker said he hated priests who reminded him of a hairdresser's assistant, too much focus on appearance, pretense. But this preacher, he looked like he forgot himself on our behalf. That lack of self-consciousness, that slightly unkempt look, it signaled authenticity. It showed his focus was on them, not himself.
Wow. That really drives home the point about authenticity versus polish.
The sources insist that sensible men, sturdy workers, they utterly abhor foppery in a minister. Affectation just builds a wall. As they put it, few ears are delighted with the voices of peacocks.
All the external stuff, attitude, tone, dress, they become barricades.
Exactly. Barriers to connection. The bottom line is, we must talk like men if we would win men. They worried about a trend towards fussy millinery styles in churches, precisely because it undermines this. They critiqued a certain stiff propriety, sometimes called dignity, that focused too much on decorum, pleasing persons of taste, but failed to be useful or reach ordinary people.
They call it sickening affectation.
There's one more story about a minister who couldn't preach because he'd misplaced his black kid gloves. The source dryly comments he was more fitted to stand behind a draper's counter. Affectation is labeled an effeminate vice to be avoided.
And they bring back Cowper. In my soul, I loathe all affectation.
The conclusion on this point is blunt. All tricks, all stage effects are just unbearable when the message of the Lord is to be delivered. Better to be rugged and honest than foppish. It's worse to be just an actor, a performer, than to simply lack polish.
They mention that caricature contrast, brimstone versus treacle, robust truth versus sickly sweetness.
And the final image is powerful. Seeing a jack-a-dandy in the pulpit should evoke Jehu's reaction to Jezebel's painted face. Fling her down. A total rejection of the artifice.
Okay, so we've heard an awful lot about what not to do. The stiff, the mechanical, the laborious, the ugly, and especially the superfine, affected style. After all that, what's the positive vision? What should physical delivery look like according to these sources?
It boils down to one core principle, really. The ultimate rule that covers everything else is be natural.
Be natural. Sounds simple. But after hearing all the ways people can be unnatural, what does that really mean in practice?
It means actively shunning any appearance of gesture that looks studied, practiced, or put on. The sources say, art is cold, only nature is warm.
So it's about genuineness, being truthful in how you move, even if it's not perfectly smooth or, cultivated.
Exactly right. Your mannerisms need to be your own, not some kind of polished lie. Affectation, whether you're faking sophistication, faking passion, faking emotion, just mimicking someone else, it's fundamentally dishonest, a practical lie.
So the action shouldn't feel added on. It should come out of who you are and what you're genuinely feeling about the message.
That's the idea. The speaker should be so true, so real, so genuinely in earnest about the subject that all those mechanical, artificial movements become impossible. Everything about the delivery should signal life, energy, focus, real zeal.
And the purpose behind that zeal is critical, isn't it?
Absolutely crucial. It can't be about seeking honor for yourself. The driving purpose has to be the glory of God and the genuine good of the people listening.
And if that's the focus, then the physical delivery, the actions and posture, they should almost disappear.
Yes. Ideally, they should be least likely to be observed. The goal is for the audience to be completely absorbed in the subject, in the message itself. If people start noticing or commenting on how you're moving, the sources say it's hindering the message's success.
They do acknowledge that beginners might need to copy sometimes, but that's not the end goal.
Right. Imitation might be a starting point, but the aim is to develop your own style. Be yourself. Authenticity just fits better, like wearing your own clothes instead of someone else's. Slavish imitation is dismissed as the practice of an ape.
They also mention fear and nervousness, which is different from affectation, but still a hindrance.
Yes, being nervous can make you cramped, awkward. But interestingly, the sources suggest that being awkward because you're genuinely nervous, maybe even making a few mistakes because of it, is actually better than being rigidly controlled out of fear.
Yeah.
Better to blunder a bit than be completely stiff and unnatural because you're scared.
So the main thing is to aim for being natural and fervent.
That's the heart of it. If the message itself is substantial, so full of matter, so fervent, and so gracious, the belief is that the audience will focus on that, on the word, as they say, and not get hung up on the delivery method, the basket it came in. A natural manner helps the speaker and the message connect directly with the listener's conscience.
Well, this has been quite a journey through some really vivid, sometimes quite funny historical perspectives on public speaking delivery. The sources clearly warn against anything that feels artificial, mechanical, or focus on the speaker themselves, calling it grotesque, ugly, even abominable.
And in contrast, they lift up this ideal of natural, authentic expression, delivery that keeps the attention squarely on the message and its purpose, which, from their perspective, is ultimately about God's glory and the good of others.
So, thinking about all these detailed examples, the stiff speaker, the invisible soap washer, the martial artist, and this core principle of being natural, what does that suggest to you, listening now, about communicating effectively, not just from a pulpit, but in your own life, your interactions?
Yeah, maybe consider this. Those sources saw things like the water wagtail posture, the penguin pose, the superfine preening, as putting up barricades between speaker and listener. How might the principle behind avoiding those things, the principle of focusing on genuine connection and purpose rather than self-conscious performance, apply today? How do we avoid putting up similar, maybe more subtle barricades in our own conversations if we really want to connect with people?
Something to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Distinct audio outro for Reformed Thinking.